too large or too long. So I stopped recording first and now I'm recording again. Just some things like I didn't, when I went through the first time and tried to clean, I didn't notice that TG and Telegram were the same thing. Making sure that I use Telegram throughout to replace TG. And then there are these two servers that basically don't have bot training ground and TEC template. And since they are so small, I dropped them too, because you're not going to get meaningful information because they're such a minute part of this. So then once you do that, you can say, well, I'm going to drop bot training ground and TEC template. Okay, so this is the count of how many praise I'm sorry, this is the total impact hours by server.
That's awesome.
So Telegram, gets the most in terms of the, go ahead.
Cat being there, or they are just too small that we don't see them, and that would be a problem, especially for Common Swarm.
No, they're rooms inside of these servers.
Oh, I see. Telegram part have Common Swarm. Oh, yeah, I see.
Rooms that I'm just consolidating it the first right now into the servers. We could do this again with the rooms inside the servers, but yeah, this is just the server, or I don't know what you call it, the service or the app or whatever. But
it's probably worth noting, just for your own, for you to be aware, the Discord server was only launched this year. I don't remember what month we launched it. So for a long time, Telegram was the only place to praise, and that's maybe we'll find that we'll balance all of our praise to Discord. Not that it, it matters. It's just there was a time where Telegram was the only place to praise a number of months.
Yeah, that is helpful to know. I did not know that. So we can look at this by date. This is definitely not like, what I'm trying to show you is the kind of things we can do. And so then you tell me what you want me to do with this. Like, I'm not saying Telegram gets too much praise or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, do you like pie charts or bar charts or? So I'm kind of just showing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying it's actually great to know, and it's great. I feel like I'm in a course right now. It's great to know, and it's great to see. And you're great at explaining everything. I don't know how it's Telegram or Discord. It's my personal opinion. I haven't spent too much time thinking about it. I think the categorization will be a little bit more interesting and revealing than the origin.
Okay. So we could do this for rooms, and we could try to do this for categories. This is me just cleaning something so that Telegram is consistent. One thing we could try to look at is we have this issue again because the distribution is so top heavy. Does it make sense to include things that are extremely high? And that's sort of that's really a judgment call. I just wanted to look at some of the quantiles past 75%. So the 80th percentile is 2.12. The 85th percentile is 2.47. The 90th percentile is 3.14. 95th percentile is 4.42. 99th percentile is 9.0682. So something we could look at doing is kind of splitting this and only looking at the bottom, whatever percent, as being more representative perhaps, but then you certainly lose information. Or you could look at the top and say, are there trends in terms of what was very highly rewarded? I'm not, like, again, I'm not making that decision right now. I'm just pointing out that that's something to consider if we're gonna split the extremely high or extremely low. So I did look at just what the exceptional praises were, sort of for my own consideration, but I'm not drawing any. This was really me playing with it to see the different types of things I could squeeze out of it, to see what you might be interested in squeezing out of it. So here we're going to try to do the part that's most helpful in terms of trying to categorize, which is organizing it into words. So this is just a technical thing. They're using a count vectorizer, which just goes through and counts the words, except I set it to be a binary result because you're not likely to see repeated words within individual phrases. So I just wanted it to tell me whether or not a particular word appeared. It's going to throw out the stop words, which are things like the and of and very common words that won't give much information. It's telling it how to read. So there's not a lot of judgment there. So if you look at so then what it does is it goes through and it lists every single word that appeared. And so let's say we had a small data set that was like 2 praises. Praise me for being great. Praise you for also being great. So what this machine does is it goes through and it just takes every word it finds and it gives it a slot. It would say, okay, there's a slot for being, there's a slot for me, there's a slot for, there's a slot for praise, there's a slot for you, there's a slot for also. And then it just counts whether or not that word appears. So in praise number A, and I think it's kind of obvious, but I just want to go through it one time. Being me gets a 1, for gets a 1, praise gets a 1. I left out great, but you get the idea. You gets a 0, and also gets a 0. So this is this is one standard way of encoding textual information in a way that can then be analyzed with different mathematical and statistical metrics. And that's what this is doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, super clear.
Okay. So then I do all that analysis and ask the computer to put it in a data frame. And you can kind of see right away the problem with doing it this way. You have a bunch of things that are kind of artifacts of, like, I don't think anyone typed this. I think this is an emoji or something, or a GIF or something. And then you also see that there are synonyms that the computer has no way of knowing should mean the same thing. And they're really, I mean, there are algorithms that attempt to fix this, but there isn't really a good fix. The best way to fix this would be to have subject matter experts go through and create lists of synonyms. And once we had lists of synonyms, then the algorithm can't tell what a synonym is, but if you tell it what the synonyms are, it can then match them up and it would consolidate these into a single representation. We could get rid of this by, there are 2 options you can give. You can give a high frequency cutoff and a low frequency cutoff. Something like if a word appears in more than 80% of the praises, it's so common it doesn't give any information. If a word appears in fewer than 5% of the praises, it's so uncommon it doesn't give any information. So we could make this list much shorter if we did frequency cutoffs high and low, and that's something that I personally would recommend, but I'm not going to make that judgment call without talking to y'all. So then just to see kind of what the list of words is, you see some of them clearly have a lot of information. And you could also do this with like 2-word phrases or 3-word phrases, although that doesn't address the fact that the computer will never know that TEC and Token Engineering Commons mean the same thing unless we tell it. And it's also going to have a really tough time like recognizing that amazing with multiple A's doesn't change the meaning of the word. So this is what the data frame looks like. Just now we have a ton of columns. we have a column for each word, which is fine. But so what I did then was I took the words data and I just glued it back to the original data. So now I have a data frame that has this 1-0 binary encoding for every word in the data set, along with the original room, reason, date, etc. information we already had. So what you can do, and this is just me like being really careful about the fact that I didn't break anything, because earlier in my analysis I did break something and I had to go back and fix it. So you can then group by things like how many of the praises were for, or how many of the praises were in a particular thing, which we already saw. So here you can do something like this is saying of the praises that included the word retweeting, what was the average impact hour per praise? By server. So we could do this with any word that you're interested in just by changing to another word. We could do it for a long list of words if we have the list. Of course, the problem is that this doesn't catch other things like retweeting with a hyphen. It will not catch. It doesn't catch, I don't know, Instagram. So this is, again, like human level intelligence would be needed to catch everything that this might mean, you know, so.
We picked a good example actually, because the retweeting tweets is basically, it's a template. I mean, it's just like, it's the same tweet to everyone who's retweeted. So we have someone on our team who goes and sees who retweeted our tweets and then does a praise, copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste. So it should be the exact wording for 99% of those.
Well, that's good. I got lucky there. So mentioning was another thing, which is, I mean, the statistics for mentioning and retweeting are basically similar by average, but this one actually showed quite a bit. This showed one of the major issues in terms of analysis. Retweeting by month varied a bit, which was kind of interesting. What was being discussed about, you know, the changes in the teams or the changes points of things. The number of retweeting is varied by month, and the number of total impact hours for retweeting varied by month. So initially I thought that maybe like the total number of impact hours would be constant. A good thing to look at here that I'm now seeing is you probably of like if we were going to analyze this, it'd be more helpful to know what proportion of impact hours that month were for retweeting, maybe, because that might be roughly constant. I don't know, but it would be interesting to know, I think. And again, I'm not drawing any conclusions. I'm trying to give you like a toolbox. So here is retweeting or mentioning, which I tried to get fancy and say, well, maybe retweeting or mentioning. So if either one appears, and I'll just call that social. And there were 800 and social misspelled, but 868 of those. And in analyzing this, it kind of showed some of the issues with trying to do this. So I split this by the month and the server. And this is the average impact hours for a praise that met that condition. So this is average impact hours per praise that contained the word, that contained at least one of the words retweeting or mentioning. So if it said retweeting and mentioning, it only gets counted once. By month and server, and a lot of them don't have any, so they get not a numbers. And I just went ahead and dropped those to 0 just for data purposes. And so then it looks like this. And I made a heat map, and you know, there is some color variation. So then you want to investigate a little, and you're like, well, so why is December Telegram worth twice as much as Token Engineering Commons April? And then so you want to look at those and see, because that's interesting. And it turns out that, so I actually looked at the things. It turns out mentioning can be more than one thing. So this person was mentioning, but they were mentioning in an article, which is obviously a lot more work than just retweeting and mentioning. But with that level of granularity, you can go back, and these are small enough now, you can actually go back and look at like, well, what were the, you know, there may be 15 of these for Telegram March. So you can actually look at them and you see individual variation. So this is me investigating that, just curious. However, that doesn't explain all the variations. So this gets to something that Griff told me in a meeting that we recorded, which is that the validators sometimes will assess holistically enough impact hours based on the initial calculations. And so they would hand edit to bring the total to what they thought was fairer. And to do that, they simply changed the number in one of the rows. So this is not in all likelihood that this 6,999, I know that it's 80 times or whatever, let's see. Anyway, whatever that ratio is, it's a relatively high ratio. It's not like this one is so as a tweet. It's like, in all likelihood, based on what I have been told, this person was doing a lot of important work that week. And so to reflect that, they simply made one of their contributions extremely important arbitrarily. Which, again, this is me trying to re-explain something Griff said to me. So I hope it tracks with what you understand about the process or with what he was saying.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think, you know, the last few, at least the last few, he's made a new column so that we can we can do the subjective changes direct in a different column instead of in the one praise itself.
Well, yeah, that's helpful. Go ahead.
It is extremely helpful to understand how the computer reads the data, because maybe we can, I mean, improve a lot the way we dish praise and have some type of guidelines. So anytime that a work like this needs to be done, there is not such a huge process of cleaning, and we can dialogue more with what the server, the bots can do. Maybe it would be helpful to have like some guidelines from like your experience of what is the best way of writing this down.
I'd definitely be open to discussing that. And a lot of it though is, it's hard because like if you were, the advantage of centralization is things are standardized and you don't. So you want to have a centralized, you could have a centralized common dialect, I guess, for dishing praise that might help. But I'd have to also think about it a little bit more. Definitely not having things like this where there's something going on behind the scenes that isn't recorded. That would be a huge help. Because I don't, at the outset, it looks like this is unfair. if you understand the process, it probably wasn't unfair, but you know, it sticks out a bit. That's definitely something I'm open to discussing more. So then, yeah, so it turns out mentioning might not be such a good thing to just group with retweeting. So my initial sort of human intelligence on that wasn't good. But any word that we would like to see analyzed at that sort of level, we could do pretty easily now. And then the final thing was like how do we categorize the praise? And I'm going to tell you, I think the ideal way to get categories would be for people to go through all 7,000, maybe have a team of 15 people, each of them pick, 500, and each of them go through and manually label. That would be the best. Can you get 15 people who understand this well enough who all do 500? I don't know, but this is a really common thing. Like I used to do work for freelance work for Amazon, where when they were first doing their machine learning algorithms, and it was just like, is this sentence about this thing? And I would go through and click yes and no. So human intelligence is a really important part of the process. And what we can do with human intelligence is, in my view, stronger, or at least a really good complement to what we can do with the computer. So we do have about 500 of these that were labeled by volunteers, and that's really helpful. So what I did was I just took the data we have, and I wanted to show you all what it would look like, one approach to trying to automate categorization. So I took a clusterer, just a standard, this is one k-means cluster, is one type of clusterer, and I asked it to do 4 categories. And the reason I asked for 4 is that initially in the meeting notes that I have, people suggested that there might be 4 natural categories, which were, let me look, because I picked 4 because somebody said I think there are 4 natural categories. So I don't see it here, but it was something like social research and 2 other things. So I picked the number 4 specifically from a comment someone made in these notes that hopefully I can find again. Oh, here it is: Twitter, meetings, coding, and research. So I thought maybe things do break down that easily, and we'll see. So I let the computer cluster based on the standard clustering algorithms. And then the problem is when it clusters, it doesn't tell me, what the clusters are. So and say, okay, we have clusters 0 through 3. 11% of the things ended up, or 12% of the things ended up in cluster 0. 66 ended up in cluster 1. 21% ended up in cluster 2, and 2% ended up in cluster 3. So it may be that cluster 3 shouldn't really be there. I don't know. Or it may be that we need to split into more clusters to try to break cluster 1 up a little bit. So then I wanted to see what the most common words are to see if I can figure out what the clusters were. And cluster 0 is dominated by mentioning, retweeting, comments, message, helping, community, social, spreading. So I think this one is the social media cluster.
I would actually say there's something, a slight difference. There's definitely a lot of the social media in there, but then there's something that's like gratitude and appreciation.
Okay.
That's really a big part of the praise system too, as well. So thanks for helping me with this thing. I really appreciate that. Octopus helped out with the data analysis, for example, which is maybe different from social media.
Mm-hmm. I see that. I'd be really interested if any of you know why 6405 is so important, because that popped up enough to make the top 20. And
could that be an emoji or could that be a character?
It
doesn't
could be
bring
an
it up to
emoji
me.
or a character, yeah. And then probably in the future, on my next analysis, I'll probably drop things like this because they're so hard to interpret. Then cluster 1, the big cluster, was work, TEC, community commons, Hatch, amazing, helping, working today, awesome, great. One of the things I also might recommend is we could delete words that clearly have strong emotion. Like awesome could be about different things, and it might help to get rid of it because it might be confusing things a bit, but that's something to consider. This one had the largest cluster, it's about 60%. So it may be that this is something where we could try to split it up more using something. And we can rerun this with a different algorithm or a different number of clusters, or with the data cleaned or prepared in a different way, and we'll get different results. So that's kind of, cluster 2 is clearly like joining meetings, I think. So joining sync, weekly, WG. So meeting / working group seemed to be that, and YouTube where the meetings were recorded, etc.
I'd like
And
to ask
then
a question. I got
sure.
a little lost in what we mean by cluster. Can you maybe just define what
Yeah,
cluster
so what the computer is doing is it's taking, like, each of these things is a point in a really, really high dimensional space. And so like we had this list of zeros and ones that were different words. And so it's actually and you can actually plot that in like an 8,000 dimensional space. These are coordinates. And so if we were in 2 dimensions, you would be looking for, you would have a bunch of points, like you'd have your XY plane, and you'd have like a point here and a point here, a point here and a point here. You'd have all these points, right? And then the computer is going to try to go through and say, well, how do these points separate? How can I separate these into groups? Where inside the groups, these groups to be close to each other and not close to other things. So like in this 2-dimensional picture, it might be that this is one cluster, this is another cluster, and this is another cluster. And there's an algorithm for doing that basically tries to find a center for each cluster and then find the points that are closest to that center. And that's called k-means clustering. And that's what it's doing. It's just doing it with a really, really high dimensional space, but it's the same geometric idea. And that will depend on how we encoded it, which is like, if we threw out some of the words, we might get different clusters. So that's why, like, does that make sense?
sort of?
It's like you're trying to
algorithmically
Go ahead.
sort the data. This is k-means clustering is similar. They use it in the community inclusion currency system to determine like people who use the most CICs. So it's just kind of a way to algorithmically sort or cluster data based on how where it appears in relation to each other.
Okay.
So what it's attempting to do is to find buckets that these things naturally fit in, or to like draw lines around them that separates them. But like, I don't really know the technical details of most of the algorithms for this. I just know like, hey, this is what people use. So I'm also trying to use it. And Sean YGG is more of an expert on that particular aspect of it than I am. So he may have a different idea about different approaches for clustering. But basically, if we're going to categorize this without having it be, to use some kind of clustering algorithm, to have the computer go through and say, here's a category, here's a category, here's a category. So the final one is like, I guess, the oddballs. I mean, there were some themes to it, but this was also the lowest value one, and it was the one that had the fewest keywords. And it looks like pretty much everything was the same. So you might have had literally one message that got repeated over and over again. I'm not sure, but so we could do different types of this with different data prepared in different ways. And then I just wanted to look at the distribution. So the clustering meetings was, and also things like this one I know is inventing augmented bonding curves. So this one wound up with the highest values. Cluster 1 was rewarded higher than the other clusters. And cluster 3 basically got very low scores compared to the others. So that's a type of analysis we could do. If we don't want to hand annotate, we could try to prepare it in a way that we got good algorithmic divisions and then analyze those algorithmically divided categories. So those are the ideas that I had and the problems I ran into, and I'm curious what y'all think about what might be next or anything you'd like to see in particular.
Okay, I'll jump in. It's been amazing to see this. I think that I'm probably not the right person to come up with the next steps for this. I think that I know that Sunday sessions where we're doing the Params party is probably the best space for us to all sync up on it. And I feel like there's a bunch of people that weren't able to make this call because it was set up quickly. So I would say maybe we can bring it to the wider group to ask everyone. I think that I also need a little bit what you shared to sink in a little bit too. Yeah, Jeff.
Well, thank you very much.
Sorry, just refilling my coffee here. Yeah, I think this was really fantastic and illuminating to look at how some of these different metrics can be used to triangulate kind of what we're looking or what we think would be good to see. Really fantastic way to break down a lot of these concepts, and I'm interested how we can use, as you mentioned, this toolkit to kind of tweak and test some different scenarios and see if there are any outcomes that are more palatable to the wider TEC community. But yeah, really fascinated at how we can break this down in so many ways. I'm blown away by the capabilities and expertise being brought to the discussion, and yeah, really excited how we can tinker with these tools to see what kind of interventions would make this better, or ultimately it's up to the community. And I think the next step is putting together some proposals, because I know we do have a time consideration to coming up with some suggestions for the community. So yeah, really excited to play with these tools a little bit and see what kind of information they give us around how we can move forward.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much. I just want to say, for me personally, it's really helpful when people can lay out sort of specific, because I'm not in a position to make value judgments. I really don't have a lot of domain expertise about this. I didn't know what praise was until 2 weeks ago. And I haven't been following the hatch or any of those things other than to know that it's happening. So if the more sort of specific questions people are willing to ask, like I can very easily answer specific questions like, what would this look like? Like how many tweets were there in January and blah, 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 and how many impact hours did they get? Or the question of how have things changed over time was asked. And it can definitely answer that. So just kind of moving from these broader discussion things to specific questions would be helpful to me.
Got
Because
it.
like I'm totally ill-equipped to answer number 11, for instance.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're questioning ourselves is how much of our impact hours are we awarding for things like joining meetings, joining calls is one of the big ones. Is it maybe disproportional to some of the other work that we're doing? We'd still want, praising is one of the incentives for people to join calls and to participate, and it creates a gratitude environment, a grateful environment, or gratitude feeling community. And I think that it's one of the things that we're questioning ourselves. We've even considered whether we should just stop praising people for joining calls. And it'd be interesting to see how much praise was given for attending a call, for joining a meeting.
So then my question is, without going through and clicking yes or no on all 7,000, maybe how can I recognize that something is for giving a call? Like, I'm guessing there are keywords that I could plug in to try to filter down, but definitely will miss some anytime you do that kind of thing. But like, we could try it that way. If you can tell me the characteristics of a praise for joining a call, I can try to find them, so.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. So what I'm understanding is it's better to questions so that you can slice the data in order to answer those very specific questions, and keywords that will support looking for those specific praise that relate to that question.
Yes, that's really helpful. And if people are willing to hand label things, like we do have 500 that were labeled, but like if people are willing to go through and label maybe 200 yes or no, is this for attending a meeting, then the computer can bootstrap on that and learn how to recognize based on having some human intelligence. But there has to be human intelligence somewhere in the process, or domain knowledge somewhere in the process, whether it's you giving me a list of words to look for, or someone labeling, yes, this was a meeting, no, this wasn't a meeting. The goal, I guess, would be to amplify the human intelligence and domain knowledge so that we didn't have to label all 7,000. But we still need to do some of that. Hand labeling would be really helpful.
Yeah, I have only 5 minutes left before I have to run, but can you show me, I know that there was a file that was shared for this categorization work. Can you just maybe walk us through that file of if you have access to it?
I think let's see. I know what you're talking about, and
I can find it too.
I'm not sure I know where it is. It might be in the README. It was a Google Doc.
Oh, I see it. Categories list. I think this is it. I'm going to drop
Okay.
it. Okay.
Thank you.
Can you also share with me what tool are you using to write on your screen like this?
Oh, so this is native to Zoom. If you when you're sharing your screen, there's an annotate bar, and you can do draw and text and change the format, and yeah, so it's built into Zoom that you can write on the screen while you are screen sharing.
So I'm looking at this.
And as someone who taught virtually for the last 3 semesters, had to learn stuff like that.
Very cool.
Yeah, so I am pulling it up too. But yeah, I'm guessing you are probably already see it. So
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. I guess there's no category for calls yet. There's a number of different categories.
so one of the things, this is kind of, I didn't realize when this was being done, but this is really kind of a large number of categories for this size of data set. Like having 7,000 observations and this large number of categories is going to be kind of tough. It would, if we could regroup some of them potentially to a smaller number, it might work better. Or maybe we could add this as a variable, and you know, maybe knowing this category plus another keyword is enough to be sure that it's a call. I'm not exactly sure, but
What would be helpful? Is there a target number in terms of categories?
I'm not sure. This is actually my first time trying to do clustering.
Okay.
So there's supervised learning where the observations are already labeled, and there's unsupervised learning where they're not. And I've never done unsupervised learning before. Every project I've done has been supervised. So we could see what the optimal number of buckets is, but I just think this is probably too many.
It's really useful feedback. And maybe what I can do at least is start with adding a calls category. So like meetings, and giving a few keywords for meetings. Is that something that I'm wondering, I don't know where the conversations have gone in the past meetings about this. I haven't been in them all, so I wouldn't want to waste your time. Yeah, I feel like the wider group that is working on this every Sunday is probably better positioned to make sure that the time you spend on this is best used.
Well,
Oh, I see.
yeah,
Participation retweets.
yeah, but
Okay.
it got grouped with retweets. So then it's, if you want retweets versus attending meetings, they're in the same category. So it's hard because it's decentralized, which is great, but then
Yeah.
it's difficult to come to consensus and standardization. So
Yeah.
I don't think anyone needs to do any work before Sunday's meeting. But talking about this on Sunday and kind of figuring out the next steps, because I'm just a cog in this wheel. So I don't know what to do next either.
Okay. Thanks for sharing everything you've shared today. Are you in, I guess, I know you can't make the Sunday meeting because of a personal commitment. I guess I'm wondering what the best way is. We could share this video with everyone so that people who aren't able to participate can see it and can even come up with maybe some suggestions, if not at the Sunday's call, actually. I'm not sure that I can participate in that call either because of family obligations, but at least this is the right message. This is the right message for them to hear.
Yeah, I've been recording and I will work on posting it.
Cool.
So.
I do have to
go. It was nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's really nice to meet you. You're really excellent at explaining all of this. I feel like I've just attended a course, like a master's class in data analysis. I really appreciate
Thank
that.
you so much.
And all that you've been doing. You've taken, you've taken to this project with such enthusiasm. It's really cool, and such skill. It's really cool to see.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
Hope
every
you have a great
project
day.
you participate in. Just wanted to throw that out there. Your skills are so much appreciated. We will shower you with praise and praise tokens of all non-financial forms.
Thank you all so much, and I'll see you again soon.
Yeah. See you
Thanks
soon.
so much. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.